3:40 my time. So I'm just going to start kind of slowly introducing this little idea that I had here. So it started out, many of you probably already know this, that last summer at Brockers, we started featuring on our Instagram a series of artists of color, trying to shine a spotlight on work that has maybe previously been not as noticed as it should be. And we continued that for, I think, about 6 months. And then we put it on pause and wanted to kind of reimagine it. In the meantime, I hired my daughter, Kelly, who is actually about to graduate with a business and marketing degree from Wichita State, and human resources and entrepreneurship. And I don't know, she's really smart. So I had her start working with me, and she kind of took over the series, and we talked about giving it more of an educational slant, and maybe instead of doing an artist every day, picking one and kind of featuring them across our Instagram for a week. And this is something that I think is important for, for our community, to show more young artists, people who look like them. Obviously, as a white person myself, I don't really quite know where to start, but I figured I should start somewhere. So that's kind of where this project came from. And this talk, I wanted to talk about how we can all join together to create more projects like this that offer a more diverse ceramics scene. And so I'm really interested in hearing ideas of what else ceramic suppliers could do, what art centers can do, what we as individual people can do to be more welcoming to people who maybe want to join our clay community but don't feel like they have a place where they can fit in. So on that note, I guess I just like to open it up if everybody wanted to introduce themselves. I see that on my screen, Tyler is the next box next to my name. So Tyler, would you maybe like to say a few words about yourself?
Oh, okay. Hello, my name's Tyler Quentin. I'm currently a long-term artist in residence here at the Morian Center for Clay in St. Petersburg, Florida. So just like talk a little bit about what I do, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I also picked on you because you were a Glenda student, so there you go.
Oh, yep. Well, I'm Korean American with completely American upbringing, and so I really don't have much of a personal connection, I feel like, to my Korean heritage. My dad was adopted at a very young age, young enough to like lose any Korean language that he had, and pretty much fully embrace kind of an American lifestyle. So that was what I was raised with from both parents. So a lot of the work that I do kind of talks about that. So like I have this vessel that I'm working on in my studio. And so a major part of my work is recreating traditional Korean forms in this sort of structural format. There's no surface area for me to put like traditional imagery or pattern. And I kind of see that as being metaphorical for my experience as going about the world as a physically Asian person, but not really having that background. So yeah, that's a little something.
That's very interesting outlook on things. The next box on my screen is Ave. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. Sorry, I had to let my dog out. I'm Ave Rivera, and I went to Southern Connecticut State University, and then I did a postbac at UMass Dartmouth. And my background is I'm Black and Puerto Rican, and kind of similar, where it's weird to be in a space of both because in some spaces I might not be Black enough, and then in some spaces I might not be seen as Puerto Rican enough because I don't speak Spanish. But I am very much both of those things, and I live both of those cultures. So there's that. But now after school, I managed to make mugs full time. Been making clay like my business, and a lot of my work deals with a lot of different emotions and pop culture and a lot of anxiety. So it's very relatable for a lot of people.
Are you also into role-playing games?
Oh, I love Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay,
That's what made my business take off was D&D.
I thought so, because of the
I'll just
chaotic
keep
good and all
making
that
D&D
stuff. Yeah.
But that's actually been a really, really fun outlet in terms of keeping me sane in the pandemic, because my friends, we've managed to keep it going, and it's a very communal experience, very much like ceramics, where sometimes the only thing to make something work, very much like a studio space, is by working together and playing together. So, yeah.
Fabulous. Twins, you're up.
So, howdy. I'm Kelly Phelps. I'm a professor at Xavier University, where I'm currently in charge of the sculpture and ceramics program. And Tyler was one of our former students at Airmount. So that just goes to show how tight knit, close family the NCECA family really is.
Yep. I am Kyle Phelps. I'm a professor at University of Dayton. I'm one half of the Twindom, and I run the sculpture and ceramics department within our department. So really glad to be here and be part of this. Our background is mostly dealing with more figurative work, social political driven work, commentary. What else?
As far as NCECA and our racial makeup, Kyle and I were mixed race. We've been attending NCECA for like 20 years, and every time we see a person of color, our eyes lock, and it's like we give that little, because it's so few. So that we're really enheartened by the fact that we're seeing more and more. So the NCECA family really creates that atmosphere of inclusion. It's getting better, because in the beginning it was like you see one or two person, and then like the black security guard, in the convention center, but that was it.
Yeah.
So now it's getting progressively better.
And got a ways to go, but we've seen a lot of growth. So yeah.
That's good to hear. I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah.
You guys were at the 2014 NCECA, obviously, because that's where you were demonstrators. And I think that was the same one with the keynote, or was that in Pittsburgh with the Yamaguchi Soul? That was Pittsburgh. 2014 was where the challenge was laid down to bring in more Black and Brown people to NCECA. Is that correct? Were you guys at that keynote speech?
I think so. I think that's when Patsy Cox was maybe the president during that time.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yep. So we've seen a lot, like I said, a lot of growth, but I still think that there's a ways to go. And having a platform like this and you doing stuff like this is where it all begins, because you reach the masses, just with the company alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's wonderful.
Well, I at least reached the Midwest. I mean, at least reach the Midwest.
It's another thing. It's great that it's March and not February, because all people of color, they celebrate.
One
African American month. So
right.
Great. So I consider myself an artist all 12 months out of the year. So it's nice to have other venues outside of that one small short.
Yeah, month. The shortest month of the year. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ashlyn, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your work while you're there working?
While I'm working. Yes. Hi, I'm Ashlyn Pope. So I got my BFA in Georgia at Kennesaw State, and my MFA at Penn State. I am currently the resident artist at the Lawrence Arts Center, and I'm also teaching at KCAI this semester as a sabbatical replacement. So I'm quite busy, and so anytime I can find to jump in my studio, I'm here. So I guess a little bit about my work and a little bit about my background. I am Gullah, which is a subsect of slaves who resided on the coastal region of South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, in Georgia. And so my family's from this group of people who've still been able to kind of maintain their culture. But like most of you or some of you, I have not grown up like practicing Gullah traditions. I grew up in New Jersey. Although I would constantly kind of go down and see family in South Carolina, I didn't really find out I was Gullah until I was 10. And so my work is heavily inspired by that and the sweetgrass baskets that my people make. And yeah.
I think it's interesting that I unintentionally, all of you that are sitting here with me somewhat have a separated relationship with your own personal history of your race and ethnicity. And please, if I say something that is incorrect, please correct me, because I am trying to get things right and I'm still a work in progress. But I think that that's so interesting that is kind of a recurring theme that several of you have indicated that your art is trying to connect to, like Tyler said, a disconnected history that you don't have. Also, Tyler, I wrote a little note to myself. Do you know Sam Chung?
I've met him at an NCECA once, but like not very well.
Because he's another, I mean, he's a personal friend of mine and also a Korean American artist whose parents had been in Korea, and he's visited there several times. And I just kind of thought that I would like to connect you two. So maybe in Sacramento, we can make that happen. That was just a total side note. I had a question in my head. Oh, Kelly's not on my screen, so I didn't even say her name. Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Kelly Sturm. For Tyler Nave, I'm the person that emails you and asks you all kinds of questions about your art and stuff. This is my first NCECA ever because I'm not an artist and I don't do things with clay. I'm double majoring in entrepreneurship and human resource management at Wichita State and graduating this May. Very excited about that. And when Cindy first approached me about the Diversity in Clay project, it was something that I was super interested in, and I thought it was an amazing project and definitely something that we should bring back and do more in depth and really try and ask artists a lot of questions and really find out what their stories are and what their experiences are and how that plays into their journey in the ceramics industry. And so that's really what I've been trying to do. This is one of my main projects working as the marketing and HR intern is I do about one artist every single week and I feature them across the week. I do the whole artist full write-up feature that you see on our website. I check out all their links and I really just try and dive deeper into the stories because I think that accessibility in industries, a lot of it has to do with visibility. And if we can promote that, then I think that we can make the industry more accessible for everyone, which is important to me.
Yeah, I think that Kelly, you've really taken this to the next level, and I'm really proud of the work that you've done. And I say that as a boss, not just as a proud parent. So, little tear. And I think that you touched on. I like the stories aspect, and I think probably everybody here knows who Roberto Lugo is. And I don't know if you just saw him on that TV show just a couple nights ago, To Tell the Truth. Did you guys all see that? The famous potter. But the message I've always appreciated from Roberto Lugo was that whole idea of getting two people down to have a conversation, and then you find out that you're not really so different. And so I kind of think that this is just like almost a big tea party, and it is. I think it's tea time. I'm not sure what they call tea time in England, but I feel like it's tea time. And so we're all sitting down here and having a conversation and telling our stories and getting to know each other better. And I think that that's kind of the beautiful thing about clay people is that we are so interested in each other. I really did have a whole rest of my thought process that I was going through there about stories and teapots and sitting down, and it's gone now. Does somebody want to rescue me and say something profound? Ashlyn, I can see you laughing at me because she's used to this.
Really cool,
Hi
interesting.
there.
You guys are doing. Oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Since Diego and Carla aren't here, do you want me to?
Would you like
say
to?
a little-
Yeah. Would you like to talk about them? Do you feel
Sure.
comfortable doing that? Oh, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay. So I've met Diego at the openings in Pomona, David Armstrong's museum. They would come periodically and have their work, and I would talk to them and meet them. I've never been to Mata Ortiz yet, but I'm hoping to get there. I find it fascinating. I've bought a lot of Mata Ortiz pottery, and I bought a couple of the books and know the history. And it's an amazing story. I don't know if any of you know so much about it, but in the 70s, this man found a piece of pottery, and that was, you know, just in the hillside, figured out on his own how the Indians 1,000 years ago had made, the native Mexican had made this pottery, and then proceeded to teach this town. And if you look at the work, it's every single person in this town is an amazing potter. And I taught in my studio for many years, over 25 years. And I can tell you, not every student I taught is an amazing potter, right? So
Right.
I find just incredible that each of these people, if you look up Mata Ortiz, you'll just be amazed by what you see. And Diego is the star at this point. He is the most famous potter with his wife, Carla, and they make pieces together. She makes some of her own work, but it's incredible. I have a few pieces of theirs. And it's getting harder and harder to afford to buy any of their work, but I just have incredible respect for that entire village, and everybody, if you're not familiar with the work, go look it up and you'll be blown away by it. But
Yeah, and Carla makes really, really tiny pieces that are so incredibly detailed. And one of my first memories of meeting the two of them was talking about the brushes that she uses, which are literally like her kid's hair that's glued to a ballpoint pen.
yes,
It's like 2 strands of hair, and it's just amazing, the detail and the precision. I can't imagine that level of patience. I don't.
and that's actually all Mata Ortiz potters use human hair brushes. That's part of the way that they make things. And when I talked to Diego once, I asked him, like, how many hours are in this piece, right? Because we all know how long it takes to make our pottery. And he said, you know, somewhere between 200 and 300. Like, that's just crazy, right? Like, but.
And I do see that it looks like Carla is now on the Zoom. It looks like she's still muted. So Carla, if you, and I'm guessing that Diego is with you, if you guys could unmute yourself, and we were just doing some early introductions. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Hello,
Oh, now, hello?
everybody. We're sorry. Hello. Me?
Hello, Diego.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello, Cindy. Hey, we're so happy to be joining the Zoom session. Although we are late, we didn't realize about the change. I mean, we were sure it was an hour, and it's 1 hour. Anyway, here we are. To interrupt you, Miriam.
Glad to have you here. No worries.
I just was telling everybody about how amazing Mata Ortiz is and how amazing you and Carla are and your work.
And I was seconding all of that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Don't lie.
And I see that we have a couple of other people that have joined us. I see Gerald Brown, who is NCECA's social media director. Gerald, do you want to pop off of mute and say hello?
Hi, everyone. I understand I work for NCECA, but I like how people just be like, any other intro that I might have had prior to this moment, they're just like, oh, Gerald's a social media curator. It's like, he's like, is she even breathing anymore? Nah, she's just a curator.
It's a big job. It's a huge
she's just
job.
a curator. Nah, but it's so good to see everyone. Lots of familiar faces, great people. So yeah, I just popped on by in between sessions, thought I'd come hang out and see what the conversation's about. Hi, Kyle and Kelly. Hey, Ashlyn. So good to see you guys.
You too. And then I see Greta Michelle is online with us. Hello, Greta. And I see Carla is now popped back on. Carla, we saw Diego a minute ago. Did you want to pop on and say hi also?
Yes. Hello, everybody. We are so sorry because we were ready on time, and I don't know. We always are in trouble with the time. Even that we check on internet, we say, okay, we have to be ready, but always something happened.
It's
Sorry,
not a
but it's a
problem.
pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so here's, I guess, since we've kind of got everybody here now, here's my big question. How do we do more? I mean, like Kyle and Kelly mentioned that it's nice to see more Black and brown faces at NCECA, but it's still not enough. So that's the question that I ponder a lot is how do we improve that? What more do we do? What can, obviously I have a ceramic supply business in Kansas. What can we do? What can I encourage other suppliers of my type to do? What can NCECA do? I mean, right now we've got Gerald here online, social media coordinator, director, monitor, curator. How can we improve the community to make everybody feel welcome? Does anybody want to just talk on that?
I'd like to take a stab at it if I could.
Yeah.
I think that NCECA is doing and trying to do a better job. The problem with that is that I think it's the sequencing of time and how they ask people of color. Like I alluded to the month of February, man, are we just popular? Everybody wants us.
Superstars.
But then it's like a virtual desert, like June, July, August, December, all the other 11 months. It's like a pin drop. So it's gotten progressively better. And I think what you guys are doing, where you guys are highlighting artists along the way, I think that's great. And it's a great start to have, it's an honor to be asked to do something for Black History Month. So let me say that, that's a start. But that to have that sense of being consistent with the other 11 months and, don't forget about all those other people. I think that's.
And just to kind of reiterate what the whole vendor things, like I said, it's your business and business like yours that reach the masses of everybody that loves clay. So that's the one commonality out of that make a difference if you're white, Black, female, whatever, that we all need it. So what better way to do that by, using your platform, your businesses and stuff like that to say, hey, there's all these wonderful artists that exist. Why don't we promote them as well? They should be just as important as anyone else.
Yeah. So that's something that I can do is to reach out to my other friends who own ceramic businesses. And I know Mid-South Ceramic Supply in Nashville started after they saw what we were doing. They picked it up. They're like, hey, this is a great idea. And so they also started posting images and artists and that sort of work. So, I mean, I'm always looking for ways that I can help to promote and help to be part of the solution. So I'm just going to make that note.
I think also something that comes to mind for me, both even prior to me, developing more internal knowledge about NCECA as an organization, is that like it really functions as like a window and a mirror. So like NCECA can be a window where information, comes through it, right? So like information comes through it and is able to, do what like Kyle and Kelly are talking about, is just like internally change the structure of how we go about things. But it also can be a reflection, because like once NCECA starts implementing these things, I think the next step is for, like NCECA is a network, so all the institutions that are interconnected through, NCECA, how do we get them to get on board or create pathways that allow them to start walking in footsteps and not necessarily mimicking, but like, trying to create that same amount of energy that NCECA internally is trying to do. And I think that is, to me, the more important aspect, because NCECA is definitely like 55 years old. So it's got a lot of like historical, structural, and institutional changes that need to be made. But like NCECA is not one of the oldest art institutions in this country, And so what other institutions can be, undergoing so, dramatic structural changes that help not only NCECA change faster, but help the surrounding area change as well. And then just like one other quick idea that popped in my mind, thinking about like, my project Clay Siblings is that we've had an opportunity to work with different like clay suppliers. Unfortunately, we haven't worked with you yet, but that should come soon. But you know, like one thing that we realize is that when we're able to work with different suppliers, we're able to provide resources for individual businesses or artists to like impact their community in a way that's beyond whatever Clay Siblings can do. So like one thing we've done is like when we ask for donations, we talk about, oh, we want to do this for these different high schools, but then we're also like, okay, we want to like impact these other areas. How can we leave Clay and help them be able to create subsequent programming that reaches other people? And so, you know, like part of that is like, you know, we were in conversation with like Kyle and Kelly about like Dayton and Cincinnati. And so like, say if we had like we would have worked with a clay supplier, we would have been able to connect to go to high schools, but then give Clay to Kyle and Kelly to do workshops and like do whatever they want to do with it. So it's like empowering people in different ways that is beyond just like me as an institution, I need to undergo change, but like, how can I be a part of that change outward facing?
And I think an important thing to also kind of like piggyback off of that is like, I didn't realize clay is a thing I could do until college because of the type of community that I grew up in. It was great and everything, but like there was kilns that people either didn't know how to teach or use, or it just wasn't accessible. So making the medium more accessible to those communities that don't know it's a thing, or who have an art teacher who doesn't know how to fire the kiln. Those are really small ways that can make a big difference to just having more people in the community of clay.
So here's a hard question, Ave. How do you find those people to give them the support and I know that's always like, I'm like, because I have a kiln tech on staff and we can do virtual kiln repair. He's been fixing kilns for over 20 years and, you know, we're happy to help in that way, but I don't know how to find these people that are needing the help. And I don't know, that's a question I'll have to continue to ruminate on. Oh, but
honestly,
also
it could
Gerald,
just be like
connection to
just
art
reaching out to
education.
people randomly. I
Like,
mean,
art ed as a major for people to take like in college, they don't require kiln like learning.
yes, I know.
So
They leave that program with no idea how to fire a kiln.
repair, kiln wash, none of that.
Right. And Gerald, yes, please put me on your list for Clay Siblings because I love your program.
Yeah, and like I think that, you know, what we've tried to do with some of the previous stuff is like reach out to just different high school teachers. You'd be surprised how many teachers actually just have kilns. Like with Clay Siblings, almost maybe 60%, maybe 70% of the schools we work with, they've just had a kiln. They might not have had clay or know how to use clay, but they have a kiln. And so, you know, it could start small, like Cindy, maybe you have a friend in like, you know, Indiana who's like a high school teacher, and then just maybe getting a list of high school teachers in Indiana and like, hey, does anybody have kilns and stuff? Like we would love. And I think that's been the easiest word of mouth because it's just so hard it's like almost trying to throw a dart with your eyes closed. You like don't know what you're hitting, what you're doing, but throwing a dart itself is giving you information, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
One thing I would say that what should be considered too is that when we give opportunities, to artists that are not always the same artists. Like we have to think about reaching a broader aspect of people who have spent their time learning and developing clay, because we've seen so many names that have had a long-standing history in clay, but we have not looked at all the people coming behind them. Because you have to remember that what we're experiencing now is that we have a lot more people of color currently who are entering into this field in a way that it has inspired so many people behind us, you know? And so we have to remember that the younger people coming into this also deserve a chance to have their work highlighted. And so I think there just needs to be a different way of thinking about programming. Also, just so that their voices get just as heard as someone who's been in the field for 40 years, you know? Also, something else I was thinking about is mentorship. There are so many people out there who want to be active, just don't know how to be. And so, or want to be a part of something like curating, and they don't know how to do that. Maybe a curator could take them under the wing and start showing them things where it's not necessarily something like a paid internship or an internship, but being willing to have conversations with people and kind of help them begin to gain information and knowledge. So just something I thought about.
That's great. I like that.
So Cindy, I have a question for you. My name's Dom. I'm
Nice
a
to meet you,
potter.
Dom. Hi.
Hi. How do you feel we can make improvements in keeping individuals in the field accountable for their actions and decisions as it exists now? Because one of the issues that I've had is having been gatekept by the clay community in a number of different ways and a number of different stages in my career. And there's no mechanism to hold any of those individuals accountable for their actions or their decisions or way of being.
Mhm.
So what do you recommend in that regard?
Can you maybe go into a little bit more depth as to what you've experienced? I'm not sure that I understand because I haven't been in your shoes and I don't know what experience.
Oh, understandable.
I would love to hear a
Yeah,
little bit more.
no. I was asked how much cotton I've picked in the middle of a thesis defense.
Are you kidding me?
No, with no institutional support. And it's okay according to the institution. So there are individuals who we need, unfortunately, to sacrifice with 40 or 50 years of experience in the field. And there's no accountability. There's no governing body for clay that says, oh, you did a really bad thing there that's going to impact generations of individuals. And that's something that could be kind of a morality police for ceramics, would be not an unfair ask.
My first thought is I want you to tell me who it was so I can give them a stern talking to, because nobody should be treated that way, but that's probably not realistic. I hate hearing stories like this because that's not the clay world that I know. And I think that's kind of really underlines exactly why we're having this conversation, because those things need to be heard so that they can be fixed, so that they can stop happening and stop detracting from what we're trying to do here. I don't really have an answer to that question. I know that NCECA had a mechanism through which you could report like harassment or something along those lines, which is great, but that's not the mission of NCECA. And I don't think that NCECA has the staff to follow up on that and actually do it justice. I think the intention is great, but unless you actually have dedicated people who can investigate, and then, like you said, morality police, it's just going to be kind of like I hear what you're saying and I'm sorry that you experienced that, but that really falls short. So I don't know how to address that problem other than to just maybe a forum for bringing these things to light, because honestly, I think white people need to hear more of these stories to know that it's freaking happening.
I think, unfortunately, what Dom has brought to the forefront is it's there. It's happened to us. Our mentor, coming out of
Right. We need to go around. It's happened to me too. Yeah.
It's shameful. It's sad, but our mentor told us we should go in the service field. We should be plumbers, or we should, do this, because they don't look at us as being as serious, or taking us serious as a white instructor.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at the picture of the two of you guys and your work in the background and thinking, how can you not take that seriously?
But it's unfortunately that it's a real thing that we all have to kind of deal with.
Right. And I had Ashlyn here before COVID happened, or maybe it was right early COVID. We sat on a couple pallets of clay in my back warehouse and she told me some stories about her experiences of life. And I think that there were tears. I'm actually almost positive there were tears. I'm a very emotional person, you guys. So I'm fairly certain that there were tears. And to me, that was like, I don't want to say it was a turning point, but it was like a really enlightening moment where I, always feel like, oh, well, I don't care what color you are. You're my friend. You're a clay person, whatever, we're the same. And it was that like light bulb moment, hearing things that she had gone through. Sorry, Ashley, I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing your story. That really to me said, we're not the same and it's not fair. And that is something that I think more white people need to recognize, because I think I'm also going to quote another friend of mine, Jill Oberman, who said, I'm thrilled to know that for 50 years of my life, I've been a non-racist, but I'm going to start my 51st year as an anti-racist. And illustrating that difference is really important, because I think there's a lot of good people out there that make a lot of really bad mistakes. And I think that we just I need to hear these stories more, and I need other people to hear these stories and hear that this is happening so that we can stop it from happening. I don't know how.
I think that's a wonderfully fair response, Cindy, and thank you for being part of the field and providing so much for all of us and this space as well. I really appreciate it.
I kind of lost your audio there at the end, but
well, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you sharing your stories with me.
I feel like I'm about to go off grid, so I'm gonna just say, ask for permission later and say sorry. And I've only been, like, my first NCICA was in 2016, and through the grapevine and through history and getting to know different people who come before me, I've never heard of an emergent artist that was Black, like, ever. And I just want to, like, make space and time for Dom, not only as, like, a pillar prior to this moment, but, like, really talking about why has it taken X amount of years at the fellowship for that person to be recognized like that. And, like, I'm for certain that it's not because nobody's applied. And I know that with confidence, because I know somebody who's a previous emergent artist, like maybe a year or two ago, who said that they were denied about 6 times. And so, like, why did it take 6 times for that person who we all well and know? I'm gonna be respectful of them and, like, my job and my process, but like, why did it take that person 6 times, like, and it's just like, somebody said something really powerful yesterday. I was at the multicultural reception. They were like, Theaster Gates' speech was like a very pivotal, like, inflection point in Sika's history, because right after that, the Multicultural Fellowship was created and a lot of other initiatives across different institutions were created. But what somebody told me yesterday that was, like, more impactful was that, like, elders had been saying stuff like that forever. Like, the people we look up to, like Winnie Owens Hart, like James Watkins, like David McDonald, like Sid Carpenter, all these people been saying that. And then it took, like, not only somebody of the multi-art world stature, like Theaster Gates, to say something in that moment in time for that to, like, have a ripple effect, but it's just like, what else do we need to see for those changes to happen? Because, like, I think that, why is Dom the first, like, that's to my knowledge, why is, like, in 2021, why is he the first, out of everybody we understand to be historical leaders, why isn't there, like, more, and I think that is, like, a very acute perspective of the microcosm of what all these problems are.
That problem is widespread. I mean, it is so widespread. Just coming back from an academic standing, I mean, in academia, notorious for that.
Both Kelly and I are the first ever in our department. You know what ever means?
Like,
ever.
Like,
to be a Black faculty in our department.
200 years for the university.
Forever,
ever.
So having Dom and others to help pioneer is, yeah, you're doing your part, but y'all got to do your part too. I mean, that's just how it's got to work. I mean, we can't be busting ass. The very first time I saw, I would say, a high-ranking Black elder in ceramics was Mr. Tanner. He was the former president with his white beard, looking all regal, and it blew my mind. It was like, oh my God, we got to be that guy. I got to be that person. And then it takes, 20, that was like 20 years ago when I saw him. It's just got to be consistent with us, our push, but it's also got to be an acceptance and consistency
Throughout the clay world.
So, yeah.
So I'm curious, Diego and Carla, you being in the Mata Ortiz village, you have a different viewpoint maybe on ceramics and minorities in ceramics. And I was wondering if maybe you guys had thoughts that you wanted to share about what you've experienced as artists, both in Mexico and when you come into the United States. And Diego, I think was your first NCICA the one in Tampa?
That was actually the second one. I went the first one to Phoenix. I think it was 2009. And I'll never forget that, of course. But I'm sitting and absorbing it all, and I'm going to go back a little bit to what Ashlyn said, about not including enough people who's not just as well known as the presenters for NCICA, but there is plenty of wonderful potters that could also be presenting for NCICA. But I think it's also a lack of time for me, not knowing as much as you guys do about the NCICA world. I can see that 1 week is not enough. And I really like the format of 2019, when it was like a previous week for whatever happened before the week of NCICA, and it was more like 2 weeks, and people who wanted to attend workshops, they could do that the week before NCICA, and then the real NCICA conference, people could go and watch the demonstrations, and they still had access to the workshops the week before, if I understood it like that. But then, and I don't know if I understood what you guys were really talking about, discrimination in the field. Is that,
yes,
was that kind of like the bigger topic?
Yes.
Well, it happens everywhere, we live in a small community, and you probably guys have already heard about it, but it's kind of maddening, and I get angry when I go wherever I go and talk about our community, and then we have whomever, let's say Cindy, who's presenting us to Brackers and their community, or if we were to present at another conference, and then Matt Ortiz is always related to the story of Juan Quesada, and whenever we go and present ourselves, there comes up his own story, and it kind of neglects everybody else's, and then he is always presented as the godfather of Mata Ortiz, and I respectfully deny that. Accepting that is like accepting that we have no previous history of clay in this region and in Mexico. If you hear our story or the history of Mata Ortiz in the documentaries and the books, and is like Juan himself, and I have to give his name, we all know, and I respect him as an artist, but everybody who talks to him publicly, wherever, they present him as almost as the creator of clay here, and it's just, it's almost absurd, it's a lack of respect to the knowledge of our grandmothers and our grandparents who have been dealing with clay forever. Both my grandmas made kitchenware. They were dirt poor, and they had to know clay in order to make their cups for the table and the plates and bean pots. And so the knowledge was there. So whenever we talk about our history, I try to talk about the real history, not only the romantic point of view, which erases everything before that, and then make us, the rest of us, to be pupils and just real followers of somebody who at the end wasn't that generous to be true, you know. So I think there needs to be more research, not only in our case, you know, but also about other authors that could also present at different places, like Ashlyn said. So yep, we all need to pay attention and do our part, you know, to do good, I guess.
Yeah, I heard a quote in this morning's keynote. It was actually from Paul Briggs, and I wrote it down because I really liked it. What he said was, "I don't want us to miss the statement that contributing to some efforts is worth doing for free." And then he went on to say, well, he was actually asking the speaker a question, will you talk about how groups can embrace this idea to address issues of injustice in their institutions? And I think that that is a really interesting point. And some of the things that I've written down from this session that I'm going to be taking forward is, I have kind of 3 key points here: mentorship, education, and then, as Diego said, research and recognition. And I think that those are the 3 areas that personally and professionally that I'm going to be working on moving forward. I really liked, Ashlyn, that was the mentorship was your idea, right? Yeah, so I like the idea of trying to find a way to put that forward, and it might be something that needs to work through NCECA, which I realize NCECA is woefully understaffed at this point. But you know, Gerald, maybe that's something that NCECA would want to help out with, you know, because you've got such a powerful social media presence, and that message can get a lot more than, I think Brockers has, like, I don't know, 1,200 followers. That's not a lot. So I would like to bring more recognition and more education and more mentorship to the ceramic community so that we can start to do better, just to boil it down.
No, I definitely, not to respond too quickly, but I do see the power, and I am pushing, like, I really do like taking some of these broader conversations and how programming is effective in communicating that through social media. But, you know, it can't just come out of one funnel, in my opinion, you know, though there is a large following on Instagram, it can't just come out of one funnel. And I really applaud you for, like, creating these dynamic conversations and bringing artists on there, because, you know, in some ways or another, it's decentering the institutions, you know, like, at some point, all these things become institutions, but, like, Brackers becomes like an outlier within, like, the greater academia institutions because of what Kyle and Kelly are saying. Like, everybody needs clay, you know?
Yeah.
And so it becomes a space where, like, somebody who touched clay only one time in their life, or somebody who's been doing it for 70 years can come and share space in there in a way that's, like, has nothing to do with if you ever gave a keynote, if you ever done, like, a book, if you ever, like, got your MFA, like, it ain't got nothing to do with none of that, you know? And it's just, like, to me, the more spaces that occupy that area start to do programming in that way, it's going to create a ripple effect that is not only going to make the NCECA feed more active, but it's also just going to decentralize as NCECA as the need to go to, you know, like, I think that's what Don was saying earlier about being the gatekeeper, you know, like, it becomes a reliable resources without making it the priority and, like, the elevated thing of, like, if you don't have this, then it's like you don't have nothing, you know? And I think that, to me, that's what I also hear with Diego is, like, you know, what if it was just like a whole, like, Instagram feed that was, like, global, right? Like, that just, like, decentralized the American canon, right? And was able to tell these historical, like, landscapes from people who've been touching clay, like, way before we was, like, all reading books about people touching clay, you know?
How great would it be to not even have a platform like this? So we don't have to do stuff like this.
Yeah. So there's some sense of normalcy. The biggest thing right now is, like, everybody's, and I think it's great, this whole notion of Black Lives Matter and, you know, that ongoing spiel, but after a while, things go silent. So another word to add to your list would be consistency, so that this message continue on throughout. You know, like, the university right now is trying to do a good job with diversity and inclusion, but, you know, it's a check mark, you know, like, oh, we fulfilled this, we'll check it, we'll move on to the next thing, and then no funding, no support, no recognition, we're off to the next thing. So big major corporations are notorious for that. You know, we'll say it because it's the PC thing to do now, but it's the consistency that really makes a difference. So have a consistent message, That's
Yeah,
right.
I wrote down continuity earlier on my other piece of paper. So yeah, consistency, continuity. You got to keep the gas pedal down. You got to keep moving forward. You can't just like say, oh, now I'm going to coast. You can't coast unless you're downhill on a bike. But eventually there's another uphill, so you better be ready to pedal.
Good.
Well, we're at 4:30 my time, so I guess it's 5:30 East Coast time. I don't know how long. I can't remember how long this was supposed to go. I'm happy to stay here and keep having conversations for as long as people want to have them. But I also heard Gerald say that she was going to need to leave soon. So I don't know. Tyler, you've been kind of quiet. Ave's been kind of quiet too. I like to call people out.
I am very quiet always. I'm very interested. I was just thinking about the topic, and so I'm going to share my experience that maybe it's not as, it's different, but that I specialize in miniatures and talking about discrimination. I was thinking that most of the time when we go for a show or exhibition, it's like I am always the last one, Most of the time the people appreciates or gives the recognition to the big pieces, or that, at least that's my perception, and it's like, oh, here we have this artist and it's and this one, and then the presentation, oh, and Carla makes miniatures, and so I feel like miniatures have been, I could say that I feel discrimination on that sense, but I don't know, I'm gonna keep doing it.
I really applaud your miniatures, and I'm gonna just like take a little step to the side for a minute. I hope you guys will all just indulge me. Carla, I don't know if you've heard of a ceramic show called the Cone Box Show. It was my dad's idea back when he was a professor of art at Purdue University. He had juried a bunch of shows from slides. When he saw the actual show, he was often disappointed in the work because maybe somebody had a really good photographer, so they had a good slide of kind of a so-so pot. And there were, on the other side, a lot of pots that didn't get in because the person wasn't a good photographer. So he conceived of a show where he could actually jury the three-dimensional object in his hand. And so he thought, well, it's expensive to ship work, so how do we make this something that's cost effective? Well, let's make them small. And so he used the Orton cone box as the parameter for these small works, and every work entered into the show had to be physically entered, and it had to be small enough to fit inside an Orton cone box. Well, this year's cone box show, I think, is the 15th or 16th iteration of that. There was a big long pause when my dad was out of academia, but I grew up looking at miniature pieces as some of the most beautiful works I'd ever seen in my life. So when I first met you and first saw your work, I was immediately taken by the amazing detail and precision and beauty. And I think in many ways, it's so much harder to work small. So I applaud you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to take a second. If no one has actually seen Carla's work, I was able to sneak in and see Diego and Carla in 2019 when they were at Normandale Community College. I was the weird guy who stepped in the back and was watching you guys. But the work that they produce is absolutely amazing, and the work that they do to support their community is really exceptional. To be able to pack up that much work and drive it from place to place, not for your own benefit, but to benefit the place, is absolutely incredible. So I just want to applaud both of you for the work that you're doing, and I think you should be on a national tour of the United States.
Yes, I agree with that.
Well, I know I've been quiet, but I really have kind of been like from the get-go, I kind of saw this as an opportunity to do a little bit more listening on my part, just because my experience is very different as an Asian American, because there are a lot of instances where people have ideas about me based on how I look. But then at the same time, I spend a whole lot of time, like, I feel like there's a level of privilege still with being Asian American as a minority. It's a weird mix of like stereotypes are typically, I guess, positive, but like, and so it's a weird zone to be in. But I've been kind of formulating a little question because of an experience last year. And I guess the question is kind of like, what's a good, what do you see as kind of the best way to create opportunity for minorities? Because like, for example, there was a show that I had entered and they had advertised that if you are BIPOC, you could waive the entry fee. And I was like, oh, cool. So this is an way to kind of get past some of the financial barriers. And so I applied, but then they had created a BIPOC POC award, and my work got that award, and then I kind of felt awkward about receiving it because I felt like I wasn't, or I didn't feel like I was necessarily the demographic that needed more opportunity necessarily. And so I was wondering if anyone had thoughts on that.
That's a good question.
You won the award because you deserved it. It's the start. It's just the start. Like you deserve that.
Good answer.
I think also it could get really like, I think that we all have to understand ways in which like, you know, xenophobia, anti-Blackness, and like, you know, like anti-Muslim, like all these different things like impact, you know, different Black and brown people and different ethnicities within those communities. But I don't think that should ever like get conflated with like racism, you know, and the ways in which racism is so nasty to all of us, you know. And I think that, you know, I follow you. I love your work. I've been loving your work for a while. You know, you're very talented and very like extremely like gifted, and Dom's right, like you deserve it. But I think also like, if this week hasn't taught us anything, is that nobody is safe from racism. Like no matter how much our stereotypes, our privileges may bend to whiteness to make us feel more appealing or palatable, whiteness hates us, you know, and at every chance it gets, it wants to remind us of that. So it's just like, you know, we all should critique the isms that maybe we might have inherited from living in a white American environment. So like things that may impact like xenophobia and like, you know, like anti-Asian like discrimination, things like that. But it's all should be towards like dismantling like white supremacy and making clay accessible and resources abundant to all of us, you know.
Tyler, could I ask if a correct rephrasing of your question would be to identify that you won an award for being a BIPOC artist? I mean, shouldn't the award just have been for your art? Is that kind of what you're getting at? That you would rather just won an award for your art because your art is good?
Yeah, like when I saw that that was a thing that they decided to do, I kind of felt like why, yeah, exactly. Like, why am I being lumped? Like, why lump all of these
Why is
people
it separate?
in their own category with their own award when it's all a part of the same show?
Yeah, I can see how that would make you feel weird. So, and that's, I think that I don't know who the place was, but I think that could be an example of well-intentioned people messing up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't know. I mean, I've stuck my foot in my mouth a couple of times, and I think I'm well-intentioned, but I don't get it right all the time. So that's a really good question. What's the appropriate way to create opportunities for minorities to level that playing field, to open it up, to bring in more people without screwing up like that?
Yeah, just to kind of touch base with Tyler, like I said, being the flavor of the month, put it that way, there's been a lot of artists that will turn themselves completely, shut everything down and not participate because you're pigeonholed to just that.
Mhm.
So
Category or that particular month.
instead of just being, judged on the merits or your creativity, your background, your experiences, what you can bring to, to clay, you have this title of color or whatever that's associated with it first.
Yeah.
And then that's just wrong, Yeah.
I think that sort of sentiment is part of what sort of like disenfranchised me from the clay community a little bit. In my post-bac, I had a professor who her only comment throughout my thesis presentation that what like my work at the time was a lot about anxiety and a lot about emotions, like, facial expressions and stuff like that. Her only comment was, so why isn't it about your race? And I'm like, am I not allowed to have feelings? Am I not allowed to make work about feelings? So like, then it became kind of, it seemed anyways, that like I wouldn't get into galleries or shows or be recognized in the NCICA world unless if I was only making artwork about being Black or being Puerto Rican. And that's like a weird, like, I respect and love that work that those people make, that like are people, showing up in my community, making work about the community that I'm a part of. But is that the only space that I'm allowed? Is that the only topic that I'm allowed to make art about?
That's what's expected of you.
Yeah.
Their eyes.
Like, oh, you shouldn't be making art about endangered species.
Yeah.
Right. And nobody would ever look at me and say, Cindy, why aren't you making art about being white?
Yeah.
That would never happen.
It's just
Nobody would
like,
ever do that.
Yeah. So I've sort of like distanced myself a little bit from, academia and the gallery world. And I was just like, let me just focus on, selling pots because I want to do this full time. And like, it's only been recently have I like sort of re-entered the chat.
I totally 100% agree with what you just said. It's so powerful that, like Kyle and I, or a lot of us, we get criticized for not being Afrocentric enough. I'm from Indiana. I mean, I've lived in Indiana all my life. I mean, yeah, I know about African history, but it doesn't make me the authority of Zimbabwe. I don't know. I don't even know how to spell that properly. So let alone understand that aspect. You can't be the spokesperson for everything for everyone. But yet, for a lot of us African-American artists, you have to be the authority when it's pointed to you. Hey, I want you to be the spokesperson for this particular race. And while your counterparts can draw everything from flowers to cows in a pasture, you have to be the spokesperson
Angry
for
Black man or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You can't have any other interest as, that's what your colleagues have.
Exactly. And it's frustrating. So it's just like, I'm just gonna sell my work. Like, away from the gallery and NCICA academia world that I was, sort of brought up in terms of learning about clay.
What Cindy was saying, there's a lot of well-intention that just falls within, the gray area of ignorance sometimes. I mean, we've had a lot of opportunities during NCICA, but after you think about it, like Tyler was thinking about his awards, like, wow, that was kind of racist. That was I'll take the check, but that was still that was kind of screwed up.
Take that check though.
Definitely always take the check.
Yeah.
I just have like a thought or a question, like, how do we like, navigate the spaces between like, where we're like called to provide feedback or like called to be in a space that we feel like we really care for and want to like, be active in and shaping. And then like that becoming a default understanding of like, well, Gerald's just a fixer, let me hire Gerald to fix this problem, and then, somebody who's young, right, is trying to figure out how to pay rent, how to do this, how to make work, how to do that, is almost getting financially swayed to keep chasing that bag versus like other bags, like I guess like I'm more so proposing like when BIPOC step up in these ways, like, are we just painting ourselves to be like the stepper uppers, or like, you know, like, I guess I don't know where
I
I'm
think
going.
that just to kind of touch base what you just said, I think diversity and diversity issues has to be important to just more than just Gerald. It has to be a broader picture. Everyone has to have a buy-in to this, or it's not going to work. You know, I think that they put things on our shoulders like, hey, well, you're Black, you can address all these issues. No, it's easy for somebody to put it off on somebody else and then for them to have to deal with it themselves. It has to be a total buy-in.
I mean, I've definitely myself have decided not to accept things or walked away from opportunities because I felt like I'd be a token, and I refused to be a token. And so I know that's something I like struggle with within myself too, when it comes to figuring out opportunities and where I can fit, because I've been the only Black person in the room for years. And it's hard standing up, because then like anything racial comes up and they immediately turn and look at me. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So this is my space to talk, huh? So like it's heavy on like the individual that is going through that. And I think we just have to find better ways of having these conversations where it doesn't solely focus on the likelihood of the only person that's of color in that room, you know? And so that's why I think like doing this right now with so many people of color from different backgrounds and different places, having these conversations, finding our common ground and the experiences we've had, and having so many ideas coming together in order to think of ways to begin to combat this is amazing. And thank you, Cindy, for pulling this together.
I have to say, I would love to have this conversation where more people have access to it and more people are involved in it and seeing it. And I don't know if that's something that NCECA can help with, or just something that I don't know how to market it in a broader sense. And, put it out on a Zoom outside of the conference week. I don't know if people would tune into that. But I just think that these conversations need to keep happening. I think that they do need to involve a wide variety of people. I'm learning new names every day. I'm trying to educate myself and then educate, my customer base and whoever follows us. I haven't checked the list recently, but I think that I might be the only white person left in this room. Even my daughter is actually, she's my stepdaughter, and she is half Hispanic. So I might be wrong. I haven't looked at the list, but I think that that's a great thing, that we do have, I think, so many different ethnicities here, so many different backgrounds, so many different experiences. And I, again, go back to the Roberto Lugo and just being able to sit down and share a cup of tea and learn that we're not so different, and learn, I'm not saying that we can solve the world's problems, but I think we can take a couple steps in the right direction. So
the cool thing about this conversation is that it automatically leads into other conversations of classism, sexism, obviously racism, and all the isms that kind of plague our society can really be achieved by this active communication. And I think that is what's really cool about this. So good.
I also think that as ceramic artists, we often congregate around studios because, in the early days, it's like you fire your work in a gas kiln, and not everybody has a gas kiln. So you end up in these communities. And I think that there is something natural about the medium of clay that makes the people that are attracted to it a little bit more, I don't want to say centered, but I'll say centered and grounded and earthy, because why not throw in all of those little words. But I think that we tend to be more willing to get in there and roll up our sleeves and work on things and make things better. And we want to be social. And as I'm saying these things, I'm thinking, Cindy, is this just your viewpoint as a white woman? I don't know. My experiences is that clay is very welcoming and something that is a community-based art form. So I feel like it's a place where we can actually start to make changes that can expand to the greater community in our own like cities and states, and maybe ceramic people can lead by example and pull in the rest of the world with us. I don't know. I'm kind of a little bit of an optimist, so.
Well, I'm wondering if somebody else as an art community is having this type of conversations. I mean, clay is so inclusive and so plural that it really leads to conversations like this. I really don't see like a community of painters or somebody else in the art world, you know, gather in a community or in a group and really discuss these topics. You know, I think it's a great part of clay, you know, that it really brings together people from the whole world, you know, with all these different backgrounds, and clay is really making us realize how rich we are, you know, in this context.
That's actually almost exactly what I was trying to say, and you just said it much better. Thank you, Diego. Well, I think one of my moving forward points is next year, I'm hoping in Sacramento, we actually get to all be there in person. And I believe that NCECA will still have the session that they call, I think it's now called Clay Conversations. It used to be topical discussions or breakout rooms. I would like to put this conversation forth in a second iteration for a clay conversation at NCECA that more people could join. Would you guys all be willing to sit down and do this with me again in Sacramento? You know, providing COVID is not, you know, in the way and all of those other things happen.
Also, just a small plug. There was a talk earlier today, strategies of communities. I forgot the full name, but it was like with Jennifer Lynn Datchuk, Salvador Jimenez Flores, Rafaela Usuli, I believe is their last name, and Paul Briggs and Angela Pozo. Yes, thank you, bro. And the conversation got cut off because of tech problems. So they're working to have a, you know, potentially like another platform to do a talk, either potentially during this week of the conference or most definitely after the conference. So definitely be on the lookout, everybody here. And it's going to be like a Zoom setup like this, or it was a Zoom setup like this. So it's not like a webinar where we can't see people's faces and interact. As well as like the Color Network is having a conversation about change on Saturday. I think that's when it is. It's gonna have Adam Chow, Salvador Jimenez Flores, Natalia Arbeláez, and April Felipe. And they're gonna, I believe it's gonna be, if I'm correct, like these squares, and it's gonna be a very similar vibe, but geared towards you know, strategy, structuring, but also like making space for like Black and brown people that have like healing spaces. So definitely everybody's welcome to join that.
That's great. Thank you for that information. I actually did see that strategies for bridging identity after it was over. I was like, well, good thing there's a replay.
So yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate this conversation. I'm gonna head off. I'm gonna try to see, I know the exhibitions, what's those things called? Receptions are happening now. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna float around. You guys got recommendations for receptions? I barely have checked out. I know Disruption is having one, but that's like the only exhibition I know about.
You know, I always love the it's NJS. I like the student show.
Jury. Yeah.
The juried student exhibition. I always like going to that, seeing the new work that's being made. It's I think that's always been the most inspirational thing I've seen at NCECA. Yeah, that and the K-12 show. The K-12 show is good too.
For sure. Yeah, I'm gonna hop around the reception.
Multicultural fellowship is tonight too.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what was. See, I knew there was another one that I knew for a fact I wanted to try.
Yeah, I literally think we have like 5 minutes. So
yeah, see, that's exactly what I was. Okay, cool. You're the best. All right.
Unfortunately, you don't have to walk very far. You just click on a different Zoom. So
I just got to get the Zoom tabs open. Sometimes my computer
I'm about to do the same thing.
Well, gosh, thanks everybody for joining me for this. This is just, more than I had hoped for, honestly. I really loved this conversation. Thanks.
Yes, of course, Cindy.
This was great.
Peace out.